Within 3 months of returning to work, my cancer had come back. In fact, if anything, that was probably a darker time than the first, because I knew really that the job was killing me, or this lifestyle, I should say, was killing me. You know, it was me not taking care of myself, the job, outside the job, the whole package was killing me.
Hi, Hannah. It's fantastic to have you on the Blue Light Leavers podcast. Truly honoured, and you're a very active member of the Blue Light Leavers group, and one of the subject matter experts in the academy as well. And I love having you there. It's just fantastic. And so you ran a session Wednesday past within the academy as well that was really well received. So just thanks so much for all your help and support. I really appreciate it.
No, thanks, Andy. Really lovely to be part of the group, and just getting to know people and chatting with yourselves. Just been lovely. Thank you.
Fantastic. No, it's great to have you there. So you've got a bit of a story to tell, and where do we start? So if we start with, yeah, I know it's and obviously people who've been part of the academy have had the privilege of listening to this before, but obviously there's a lot of podcast listeners that won't know you and won't know your story and what you've done since. So should we start with your policing career and the type of roles that you're in there, and then we'll move on to what happened and why you left the police?
Yeah, of course, no worries. So I was in West Midlands Police. I joined in 1998 at the grand old age of 21. So you know everything at 21, right, don't you, Andy?
Absolutely.
So you think you know everything, you've got it all sussed, and you're starting off on your career, and off you go. Turns out you don't know everything at 21 at all. And it was a huge learning curve for me. For those that know West Mids, I was based in Chelmsley Wood and was on response there. And I will say, I just fell in love with the job, Andy. I just absolutely loved it. Definitely felt I'd found my career, my identity, my passion. I hadn't done anything else apart from a few waitressing jobs or whatever. I wasn't qualified, didn't have a degree. And this was just perfect. So I did have a fantastic career, and it was something that I realised I really loved. And was good at, and I can say that now, probably wouldn't have said it then, but yeah, I was good at it and I loved it. So I worked on response in uniform for about 6 years at Chelmsley. And then I moved to the local CID there, again at Chelmsley Wood still, and did probably about another 6 years. So it's about 12 years in all, before we got to 2010. And I did CID over at Chelmsley and at Solihull, sort of moved around a bit between stations. So I would say up to that point, it was a job that I loved. I had great teams. I don't mean you never had problems or issues, but generally speaking, I would say I was well and happy and enjoyed my career. Was getting more. I had young kids by then, and anybody who's got a young family and working this job, my husband was also in the police, so I think a lot of people relate to that, the huge juggling act that is, missing things, the stress of that. So I don't mean there wasn't any stress or any being absolutely exhausted sometimes, but I would still say up to that point that I very much enjoyed my job. But in 2010, Paragon happened. So for those, again, who might have been in West Mids, would know what that was. But it was a huge reshuffle of the force, really, because they were starting the funding cuts through the government. So it was a huge reshuffle. And really all they did is took every CID officer, that's every officer, from the murder investigation units to sexual abuse to domestic violence, robbery squads, burglary squads, every single CID officer across the force, and basically put us in a huge melting pot and just dished us out. They said that they were interested in where we wanted to go and what we wanted to work, but the truth is that you were just going to be moved, really. A few people had exemptions, but you were just going to be moved. And I think a slight sort of light went out in me a little bit there, Andy, because it really was very much, they weren't interested in your experience or your desires or your passion. It was just, you're just going to go where we're going to put you. So I got moved to Coventry, Chase Avenue on the 4 CID there. And I can't say that I didn't enjoy any of it, but that it was a big change for me. And for whatever reason, I probably couldn't pinpoint it now, I didn't hugely settle there at all. Didn't know the team as well. Half the team at least were new because we'd all been dumped in this melting pot. And it was very different. It was a different vibe, a different energy to the team. Nothing that I could say to you that anybody was awful or horrible, just really different, and where you just don't feel you gel as well. So that started to take its toll, but so did the work, so did the politics, the home office policies, the frustrations, the lack of staff. I just think what everybody would probably recognise. I don't mean, Andy, that there wasn't traumatic jobs that we'd been to, because people often relate that in the police, of course. And of course there was that had also started to build up and take its toll. That sort of drip effect that you probably don't realise is happening, but it is. I also had some issues with family stuff at home. So I think as well, this is often what happens that I'm seeing now in my practice, is that it's not necessarily one big thing that somebody comes to me with. It's just a huge melting pot of stuff that is building up and up.
So yeah, we were talking about Paragon and the impact that had on you and obviously the teams as well. And so what were the next stages then in terms of where you're?
So the next stage is really for me is that I would say now I would recognise that really where I was reaching is burnout, just totally overwhelmed, compassion fatigue. So really struggling to find any compassion or kindness for my victims, my jobs. I was trained in rape and sexual violence and interviewing child witnesses and victims of crime. And as anybody who works in those areas know, the sort of result rate or trying to get their cases or any sort of justice is shockingly low for them. So it was constant frustration and difficulties and obstacles at work. So, but Andy, I say those words now, but I wouldn't have recognised or admitted, I think, that I was struggling from any sort of mental health. This was, sort of 10 years ago, and just would not have been something we talked about or discussed or admitted. But next, what happens for me is I found a lump in my breast, and very quickly knew, I was only 34 and very quickly knew that it wasn't right. I didn't hang around, didn't think it was cancer, to be fair, but I knew it wasn't right. And I was seen very quickly by our amazing NHS. So that was incredible. But yes, they told me very quickly I'd got breast cancer. So this was just a huge shock. Obviously, we've got no cancer in our family, no breast cancer in our family. It's not a hereditary thing. I was 34. Everybody told me you're too young, all this stuff. So, and I do want to just put in here, Andy, because I know it's not a podcast about that, but if there is something that you don't think is right and you're not happy with, do go and get it checked out, because that is why I'm here, and that's why I was, able to treat this and deal with this, because I did go straight away and find this and deal with this early. So yes, so this I was off sick, and obviously this hideous sort of shock, sick, trauma, distress, despair, all those feelings. But I will say very quickly, and I mean probably within about a week of this news, the other feeling I had was relief. And I was just relieved that I didn't have to go into work. And that was a bit of a light bulb moment that I thought, Hannah, this shows how shit this is at work, that you are relieved. Not relieved I had cancer, that's daft, but relieved that I had an excuse to not go into work. And Andy, also on the back of that, I was relieved that I had a good reason for not being at work. There's no, that sounds so awful, but I wouldn't have gone off with mental health or stress. I would not. I just didn't think it was done. So I was relieved that I was off sick, and I was relieved that I had a good enough reason to be off sick.
Wow.
So it was a really difficult time. I would say work was supportive in a kind way. They were kind and gave me an amazing amount of time off sick. I had 9 months off sick. I went through chemo and surgery and all that you do. And then I went back to work 9 months later. And again, just to talk about that a little bit, because there will be people that are listening that have probably had long periods of sick and have been struggling. And again, my team and my gaffers were kind and supportive, but there was actually nothing in place to actually support me, if that makes sense. You know, someone to talk to, or a buddy or a mentor or something to help me adjust back into the job after what I'd been through. So I hope that's changing now, but it wasn't at the time. And I soon realized, Andy, that it hadn't really changed a lot. And my tolerance level was probably even worse, I think, because of what I'd been through myself. I was struggling very much to be tolerant and kind towards others, actually, with what I was sort of going through. And I do remember, again, another, because you look back, don't you, at those sort of light bulb change moments. And I was dealing with a stabbing victim. And she was a criminal as well. She was a drug dealer. She was a thief. She was, you know, and she'd been involved in whatever that I got caught up in, and she'd been stabbed. And she was on the phone whinging to me about the police, and we don't do anything, and we're useless, and this kind of the other. And I did nearly say to her, well, you know, you're a drug dealing, thieving little shit. And I know I'm sounding awful saying this, but I think it's really important to say, because I think there will be officers out there that are so close to those sort of things. And luckily I didn't say it. And I actually put the phone down. I was so close to saying it. I put the phone down. Yeah. But it did really not frighten me, because that's the wrong words, but I did know I probably could have either been disciplined or lost my job for that. So I didn't say it, and I had to phone her back and make an excuse. But I realized I was that close to speaking like that and behaving like that. But anyway, so it hadn't changed for me. And within 3 months of returning to work, my cancer had come back. And in the same breast, I had cancer again in the same breast. And I just had to go off again, facing more time off sick, more treatment, and working out what the hell I was gonna do. Yeah. So yeah, in fact, if anything, that was probably a darker time than the first, because I knew really that the job was killing me, or this lifestyle, I should say, was killing me. You know, it was me not taking care of myself, the job, outside the job, the whole package was killing me, and I needed to do something about it. So I had another 9 months off sick. The job again were great in supporting that. But I knew I had to make some bigger decisions. And in 2013, I decided to resign and start to look after myself and try and recover and heal and learn what that meant for me. It wasn't an easy choice, Andy. Despite having had sort of probably a crap few years, before I got sick, this was still a job that I would say was my career, that I loved. It was my identity. I think a lot of people understand that in the police. I didn't know what I'd be if I wasn't a police officer. Who are you if you're not a police officer? I didn't have anything else, you know. So when I left, I had no career, no income, no confidence, no self-esteem, got shit mental health, shit physical health. No qualifications, no identity. You know, it was a really dark place. And a pretty.
Can we talk about? Sorry, Becca, go on.
Yeah, of course, go on.
That process, that decision-making process, Anna, around obviously you'd been through that incredibly traumatic time. The support, you could feel that you're on that breaking point, and you know, with that phone conversation, the decision process to actually leave. You know, people tend to spend a long time in that loop of, I hate what I'm doing, I want to leave, I can't leave, there's nothing else I can do, and they can be stuck in that loop for literally years. And obviously it was you know, the cancer would have had a massive impact in terms of your decision-making process, and that penny dropping to say, actually, this lifestyle, what I'm doing is killing me. Were you stuck in that loop for a while, or was it fairly quick?
I would say, it definitely wasn't overnight, sort of type quick. It definitely, after the second diagnosis, after my first diagnosis, I was very much that I wanted to get better and go back to work. I don't think I don't think that crossed my mind really about leaving. But the second diagnosis, I think, was the wake-up call around whether I should leave. And so then I was off sick for 9 months, and I would say over that 9 months, definitely that's what went round and round in circles in my head, of whether I should leave. So yes, I would say that's probably, as you say, Andy, probably quicker than most people who probably do it for years. But it wasn't overnight, because I really wrestled with it. And that's why I sympathize so much, Andy, with people who are struggling with that decision, because I had cancer twice and I was still struggling to say. I knew the job was part of that. I knew it was a big part of that. And I still was struggling to leave. So I really sympathize with that decision for people.
No, it's incredibly tough. So the period after you left, did you have any thoughts and any ideas on what it was that you were going to do? Or, how did you come across the career path that you've since taken?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That wasn't my idea or my choice at the time. And really, I spent a year after I left getting me well. So and really immersed myself in every side of it, because, and I will say as well, physically, if you put a tick box on my form, as I had to do a lot for all the surgery I had and treatment I had, physically I looked very well. I was young, I wasn't overweight. I didn't have any other underlying health conditions. I didn't smoke. I would drink on a piss up, please do, but otherwise not much other than that. So physically, my blood pressure, all that you have to do on all the forms was all great. So why did I have cancer? And I know it was the mental and emotional strain that I had been under for years. So I looked at all areas. I had to look mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. It wasn't what I was going to do at first, but I just learned so much about myself, about others, about the world we live in, how you look after yourself. I read books, I went to therapy, I went to events, podcasts, everything, everything that you could do, I went and tried it. I think you mentioned last night I did energy healing, and that's actually one of the first things I trained in, because I found energy healing so helpful for me at that really difficult time of my life. So I immersed myself in it. But then, after that, Andy, when things were really coming together for me and I was feeling so much better in myself and knew I had these tools and information and experience of how to look after yourself, I thought, actually, this is maybe something I could do to help others. I knew there was lots from colleagues. My husband's in the police still. I knew there was so many people feeling like I was feeling, and maybe I could help them too. So that's what really sort of got me on that path. And there's a great phrase that we do use in mental health, which is, your wound is not your fault, but your healing is your responsibility. And I felt like I had done that and grasped that, but maybe I could help others take that path too. So that's really where it started.
So how do you go about doing it? So for people who might be thinking, actually, this is a career path that I would love to go down, how did you identify the types of programs and courses that would be good for you, a really good fit for you, but also for the direction that you wanted to go in terms of your career path as well?
Yeah, absolutely, because there's lots of different routes into mental health and well-being. So first off, I would say it would be really important to know what that means to you. What does good mental health and well-being mean for you? Because really, once you find those, I spoke to so many people, read books, went on events, and some of it, if I'm honest, meant nothing to me and didn't really resonate at all. And some of it was life-changing. And then some of it was in the middle, not either just good, just a nice thing to have in your back pocket, sort of thing that you pull out from time to time. So you should find what works for you and experience that world a little bit yourself. Because then people, you can resonate with people and they can resonate with you when they know that you understand and that you've been through that journey a little bit yourself. So then I started to look at a variety of different approaches, because as wonderful as the energy healing was, that wasn't gonna, for me, be my business, particularly in emergency services. That wasn't going to pull in most of the emergency services. So yes. So then I did a wellbeing coaching course, a wellbeing life coaching course. And again, what I would say now, Andy, there's so many different ways you can do this. I did it on a residential course in person, but you can do it. A lot of universities offer it over 12 months, and you go, say, once a month and do experience and research and practical experience in between. You can do courses online, you can do qualifications online, as in live online, or just in your own time online. So there's so many different ways now. It's fantastic. And if people are still in the police but are interested in this, there's lots you could do around your work in the police. So I did a residential wellbeing coaching course. I did a mindfulness-based stress reduction diploma. That was an online course. I also did a counselling diploma as well in PTSD. But what I would suggest, Andy, is almost slightly in reverse. If you'd like to be accredited, which obviously what most people would look for in terms of making this a career for you, it would be really important to find what governing bodies find an accredited course with a governing body. So my Wellbeing Life Coaching course is accredited with the Association for Coaching. So that's my governing body. My psychotherapy course, BWRT, is accredited with the National Council of Psychotherapists. So they're my governing body. So I would, because there's obviously courses out there that are wonderful and give you great knowledge and experience. Sorry, Andy, my fault for the interruption then.
Don't worry, not a problem. I can't complain, can I? The dishwasher man turns up, so it's really not a problem.
Sorry.
Not an issue.
So yes, what I would say, I would say if you want to be accredited with a governing body, some people want to be with the British Association of Counsellors and Psychotherapists. There's lots of different governing bodies out there, but find what courses they recognise depending on who you'd like to be governed by, and what their requirements are. So for example, with the National Council of Psychotherapists, I have to have CPD, I have to have supervision, obviously like your public liability insurance. So I would have a little look first at the governing bodies and ask around. If people want to have a chat with me, I can help point them in the right direction. So ask people who are already in that job as well. I'd always be open to chatting to whoever was interested in that.
Fantastic. That's really kind of you. Thank you for that. And so how did you feel about setting up this new career path and effectively being a business owner and setting that up, and then, getting known and, starting to do therapy with people and healing, and, how did you go about that, Hannah? What was the process that you went through?
Yeah, it didn't all happen overnight. As you all know, Andy, it doesn't. It can all look on social media and everything else like you're mega successful in the first week, and that it certainly wasn't true for me, and that wasn't the case. Again, I did take help in that area. Lots of police officers are not business led. We haven't had to run our business. We get paid every month, and we go and get told what to do, and we do it. So it's the absolute opposite of that, of needing to find that motivation, that drive, that discipline to do it yourself. So I'm not going to pretend that that's always easy, because it's not. And I did get help with that. I went to business coaches, I read books around those topics. So anything to help me in terms of legally what I needed, but also practically. But ultimately, Andy, it has been building it up and building connections, building trust, talking to people, people getting to know you a little bit, word of mouth. I'll still say, Andy, and I'm on the socials and I have a little bit of marketing, a very little bit, but I'll be really honest, it's word of mouth. It's people getting to know you. It's you know, therapy is a very personal, sensitive topic. And most people will want a recommendation. People will say, yeah, she's good, or yeah, she understands. Yeah, this really helped me. So I will say it has been word of mouth, 100%. And I really would still say that now, that I really value that. I value my clients. I've got good boundaries, but I support them. I listen to them. I care about them. And that has been the main thing that has built up that work for me.
Yeah, sure. I think that's fantastic. And obviously, I'll put links within the show notes to Blue Light Wellbeing and how people can contact you as well. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But it'd be really interesting to talk a little bit more around how the courses that you've done and the training that you've done, how that actually helps people and the difference it makes to them. And so if we look at it maybe from the stage that people are at when they come and approach you and speak to you, without getting too personal, but what you do to help them and the process that you go through, and almost like a day in the life of type of stuff. But it'd be really good to know, how that training actually and support that you give people and how it's impacted them. It'd be really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think I'll come back to a little bit of personal experience as well, which always really helps. After I left the police and I had started up in my business, because the first thing, apart from energy healing, the first thing I did was the Wellbeing life coaching course. And so I started up as a wellbeing coach at first. And what I would say is even a few years later into that work and that business, and I was managing my own health and life really well, and it was in a good place. But what I did have is some hideous flare-ups of PTSD. I mean, hideous. And they would take me out for about 3 days at a time when they came up, of just overspilling of anger, bitterness, tears, physical pain. I would actually get physical pain down my head, neck, and into my arms, almost like I was being paralyzed. They were hideous. And then I would sort of settle that myself and work on that myself and return pretty much back to normal. And so I was coping. I had a good life. I'm not trying to say that it was PTSD that crippled my life. I'm not saying that, but it was, when it came, it was hideous. So I wanted to look for a therapy that would actually totally resolve that, not just manage it. And so actually that's how I came across the psychotherapy that I now do as well, called BWRT. So that's Brain Working Recursive Therapy. And it was fantastic, absolutely fantastic, Andy. Offered very fast, actually, and effective treatment for PTSD for me. And I will say, since having it about 3 years ago, I've never had a flare-up since of PTSD. So wow. Yeah, so it has been incredible for me. So I think that's why I bring that up in what I do with people, because those are the two main things I would say. I bring in all the experience that I've got, both lived experience and qualifications, but the two main areas would be the wellbeing life coaching side is how you build resilience and your own tools and techniques to cope with life, what life gives you. I'm not going to sit here and say life doesn't throw shit at me now, because it does. And, life has its ups and downs, as it does for everybody. And you don't want to be in therapy all the time. You need to have those tools and techniques to manage that yourself. How do you cope with those negative thoughts? How do you cope with some of the stuff like life throws at you? How do you build resilience? How do you cope with negative chatter and catastrophizing in your head? So those are tools and techniques and exercises and processes that I talk through with people. So we look at it from a coaching structure type of way. But the BWRT is a psychotherapy that's a standalone psychotherapy that we would work with that in a particular session. And that is incredible at working through PTSD, trauma, anxiety, addiction, depression, almost any psychological response, Andy, that we
Sorry.
Don't. Yeah, no worries.
So how can BWRT help?
Yeah, so this is what the psychotherapy that massively not only helped me with my PTSD flare-ups. I've never had any since I had my BWRT sessions. So it is a fantastic, and it obviously made me think, I need this in my practice. I'm going to go and train in this. It's incredible. So, but it is a psychotherapy. It's a standalone psychotherapy that I work with lots and lots of clients, and can help with PTSD, trauma, anxiety, addiction, depression, almost any psychological response, Andy, that you don't want anymore. Certainly if it's negatively affecting or really holding you back, crippling you in your life, then it is a fantastic therapy for that. So I work in both those ways as my main approaches: wellbeing life coaching and BWRT. But just bringing in all of that experience, both for myself, both for what I think as well, Andy, and I know we talk a lot about this in Blue Light Leavers, people don't realise how much experience they have in the police, not just what happened to them, but how they watch what happens to the people that we deal with. And we watch that tapestry of life. We watch how it sort of affects people, the ripple effect, the damage it can do. And it's actually incredible. You're learning all the time, every single day in the police, you're learning about human beings and how we behave and react. So it's an incredible way of bringing it into this sort of work.
Yeah, I love that. And I think there are going to be so many people who this resonates with, because it ticks all the boxes in terms of, like you say, that lived experience that we've been through as well. But also the fact that, it sounds really cheesy, but the reason we join the job is obviously to help, support, be there, really make a difference. And so I think it's really lovely that, using the really tough and challenging experience, the life experience that you've been through, and with cancer and how the job was impacting you, and then being able to use all that. And also, I think a massive part of this investing in yourself as well. I mean, you haven't just, you've spent money, you've invested. And I've done exactly the same thing. I've spent money, invested in myself, and new skills, courses, programs, that sort of thing. And that makes such a difference, doesn't it? But the end result is that actually you're doing something that you're really passionate about and that you love doing, which is incredible.
Yeah, 100%. And, Andy, people say now, well, doesn't it take its toll? This type of work, isn't it stressful? And it is. I'm not saying it's not. I don't think you're going to find many jobs with no stress at all. But what is completely different to the police is being able to have that time to actually put in to help people. I get to make my own choices of what I do and don't do in order to help people, rather than constantly be hampered by home office statistics or tick box forms that you've got to do, or anything that comes up in the police that stops you doing the work that you want to do. And I don't have that. And so I think when you don't have those frustrations and you don't have that bureaucracy holding everything back, and I do get to have the time I want, the investment that I want, the compassion that I want, then that balances out the stress of it and the sort of intensity of it. And it is intense, but I also have learned how to manage that, how to look after myself, how to have those boundaries. So it's completely different stress. And I wouldn't change. I will say that I wouldn't change it at all. I've not regretted it. I miss people. Because I work for myself, so I miss people. Hence why I keep coming and talking to people, Andy, like yourself, and podcasts and groups, so I can get out and speak to people. But so I do miss the team. I miss the camaraderie. I think a lot of people will say that leaving the police, but I don't regret it at all otherwise, and just have a much happier and healthier life. And I will say it's 10 years on this year from my second cancer diagnosis. So
wow,
I'm sort of, I hope, proof in the pudding that you can have a different way of life, and a really lovely way of life outside the police.
Yeah, I've heard people, I think it's a fantastic phrase where they say they miss the clowns but not the circus, I think is the which I think is a brilliant way of putting it. But if we just go back just a fraction and just talk about, you were saying obviously it is intense. You do get people who are going through really difficult times, and obviously they want help and support from you. So it's, so using an awful lot of your grey matter and the skills and experience and everything that you've picked up from the courses and training that you've done. Do you get help and support yourself? You said yourself that you can manage and you can cope with it now. But do you get any outside help and support as well to help you to cope with what people are telling you, and just to make sure that there's no tipping point or anything like that at all?
Yeah, 100%. And that's really, really important. So thanks for bringing that up. And just if I sort of slightly go back a little bit as well, because it's on that same topic and theme. When I first was trained in terms of wellbeing coaching, I sort of put myself out there and marketed myself as a cancer mentor as well. So helping others who were going through cancer. And so I actually saw a lot of people that were going through cancer. And actually that did become too much for me. And I realized that was probably just a little bit too close to home. At the time, maybe it would be okay now, but at the time it was too close to home to constantly deal with people suffering with cancer. And so actually I listened to that. I listened to myself again. So it is constant self-care and checking in with yourself. And if something is getting too much, it's okay to pull back on it. I felt a little bit guilty at first. So I should be sharing these, these skills and experience with other people going through cancer, but that is bullshit, if I'm really honest, Andy. And you have to listen to yourself and what is okay with yourself. And I realized that it was just a bit too much. So I wouldn't see anybody with cancer now. I would, but it was sort of overload and quite raw. And so that was the right decision for me. But yes, on a general basis, you're absolutely right. And so I have to have supervision. That's part of my governing body. And you have to have, for my governing body, you have to have 6 supervision sessions a year. So that's 1 every 2 months. But I'll be honest as well, when I'm dealing with a particularly heavy caseload, at the moment, I'm contracted to homicide support. So government funded support service for bereaved families of murder manslaughter. Wow. And so those can be really difficult, heavy cases. And I book in more supervision, and I do. And I talk it through. I talk my caseload through. Sometimes I have a little bit of a cry. Sometimes I have a little bit of a rant and rave, because it's just human beings. And I'm a human being too. So 100% I have to have supervision, but I book in extra if I need it, and I listen to that.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I love that. Thank you. And no, I appreciate you being so honest about that as well, because I think it's incredibly important to know that, you can't do it alone. When people are going through tough times, you do need that help and support yourself to be able to cope with what you're hearing. And yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you.
I remember, Andy, once on Facebook, I'd put on that I'd seen this amazing coach that had really helped me with something. And somebody privately DM'd me and said, why, like with you as a coach, would you say that you're going to another coach for help? And I was like, no, if I don't support that we should see other coaches or therapists or professionals to help us through something, to get us over an obstacle, to work, some shit through. If I don't advocate that, then I'm rubbish at my job, So it's really not only fine, but important to share that we are all human beings, and I'm going to struggle too. And I go and get help if I need it. So yeah.
Perfect. If we can just touch on the typical reasons why people come to you, Hannah, and then the outcomes as well, that'd be great, because people might be wondering, what is that tipping point of when I think I need help and support? I'm going through a shit time, I'm not happy, I'm not happy in my personal, I'm not happy at work, or it could be complex PTSD, those sort of things. So yeah, what are your typical, the typical clients, if you like, and what are the outcomes? What can people expect from the help and support that you give?
Okay. So I would say typically I see about 50% of my clients are probably emergency services, mainly police and NHS, I would say. Do have some with fire, with armed forces, veterans, but I'd say the majority is police and NHS. I do see people outside those roles. It's not exclusive to those roles. So obviously I therefore get quite a variety because of a variety of clients that I see. What I would say has seen a change over the pandemic, Andy, which is fantastic, is before the pandemic, mostly the people that I would have seen were really, really in a bad place, sort of kind of like myself, really, and on their knees, despairing, really struggling, family life, work life, anxiety, panic attacks, PTSD, trauma over years often. So, but what I would say I am seeing a shift after the pandemic is people coming earlier than that and are really, really just, there was lots of awful stuff out of the pandemic and COVID, but that is a really great thing out of the pandemic and COVID is people are realizing we can talk about mental health earlier than being, for example, suicidal, self-harming, or your life literally falling apart at the seams, and people can come earlier than that. So that's great to see that I'm seeing people with no less important, but perhaps less further down the line issues around struggling with anxiety, their mood, their confidence. And what can people expect? So I think what would be really important to put in here is that coaching and psychotherapy is not counselling. I don't mean you can't come to me for counselling, but a lot of people traditionally think counselling is sort of months and months, if not years, of therapy. And I would say for me, that's almost the complete opposite. What we look at, and the psychotherapy I work with can change things around very, very quickly. If I say for my PTSD, I had 6 sessions. I had 3, but they were 2-hour sessions. So let's say 6 hours of the psychotherapy, and that's it. So, this wasn't something that I had to go and talk about every incident in the police and everything that bothered me, everything about the way the force treated us. I didn't. It can be really quick and effective. So yes, I would say if you're thinking that, certainly in terms of cost as well, about whether people can afford private therapy, do ask, ring up and ask. I offer a consultation to people for free. Ring up and ask, what could we maybe deal with you might say, okay, I've got enough funding for 6 sessions. What could we deal with in that time? This is what I'm struggling with. How could you help me? And I'll be honest in what we should be looking for and how you should be feeling different after 6 sessions or 3 sessions or 12 sessions, but come and ask. Because for me, certainly how I work, it's not months and months and months of therapy. If people want to, Andy, come and talk, because we know everybody sort of says about come and talk to somebody, pick up the phone. And if people want to come and talk and offload and want to just spend their entire session coming and just talking to me and getting it off their chest, that's also absolutely what I do and offer, because that's incredibly important. But I will say, particularly, I'm going to be honest, for men, they don't always want to do that. And certainly the BWRT, it isn't needed. You don't have to explore every single little nuance and feeling and response. And we just need to know how you're responding and how you would like to respond instead. What changes would you like to see? So that can be really quick, really effective. And then, as I said earlier, just some tools, some techniques. How do I do that? How do I know when? That's the other thing, Andy, people ask me all the time. How do I know when this is too much? As in drinking too much, spending too much? Are we arguing too much? Do I sleep enough? I get those questions all the time. And so we help you identify what that is for you, how you can recognize when you're going under a little bit, really, so that you can catch it before you're at that serious end of mental health.
I know you've obviously there's testimonials and on the website and through social media and stuff, and I know you're obviously doing amazing work, and obviously I've seen it firsthand through the Blue Light Leavers group in the academy. But in terms of outcomes, what can people expect? You're saying obviously that they recognize that tipping point, or the when. How do I know when? But how has it impacted people? What are the sort of the positive changes that you've seen in people and people can recognize in themselves?
Gosh, it's so varied. So I'll sort of pick some off the top of my head. So if let's talk about PTSD and trauma, because that's obviously a very common theme amongst emergency services. So with PTSD and trauma, what is often happening in people's lives is that they are subconsciously, usually, sometimes it's very overt what is happening to them with PTSD and trauma, but often subconsciously being triggered regularly by their previous traumas and PTSD type symptoms. So PTSD type symptoms can be things like flashbacks, nightmares, hyperarousal, hypersensitivity. So I would say with BWRT that I work with, you could look at either a complete removal of those symptoms or responses, or certainly a huge reduction in them, so that when they do, if they occur and when they occur, they are much more manageable and not affecting and impacting your day-to-day life. So those are some incredible changes, I will say, with and ones that I can testament to myself as well as working with others. If people come to me with panic attacks, again, either completely removing their panic attacks or reducing them hugely. Addiction, the same, addictive patterns and addictive behaviors. So those are, I will say with BWRT, they also work with fears and phobias. So slightly different to sort of past traumas, but fears and phobias. So again, I used BWRT for my fear of flying. I had a horrible fear of flying, and now can fly completely normally and comfortably and no problem whatsoever. So it's fantastic at removing fears and phobias as well. So that's the psychotherapy side. I think we also talked a little bit last night, Andy, on the group about performance anxiety and confidence and low self-esteem. So I work with lots of people that helps build their confidence, build their self-esteem. BWRT is fantastic with performance anxiety, so removing that crippling fight or flight type response when you have to go and do an interview or public speak, do test exams, that sort of thing. So that's the BWRT side. The wellbeing coaching side is understanding yourself better, understanding where are your trigger points, where are your strengths, where are your weaknesses, how do you recognize in yourself what's happening, how do you manage your emotions, how do you talk to yourself, how do you stop the negative chatter, how do you stop catastrophizing. So it's very individual for each client, obviously, that comes, depending on what they want. But I help them put those structures and plans in place so that their life can change in terms of support and resilience and structure. But actually, when stuff happens, it can also change how they deal and respond to it. So that we're not so, I think a lot of us fear stuff happening, if that makes sense, and that's really common. So we fear anything going wrong, what might happen. It's actually got a name now. It's called future traumatic stress disorder. Yeah, instead of post-traumatic stress disorder, so future traumatic stress disorder. And that's when it's seriously affecting your life, but almost unable to do anything without catastrophizing and worrying so much that everything and anything will go wrong, and wanting to control every little factor, thought, planning lists, a million things, trying to control the future. And so it helps them understand that if they're better prepared for stuff that may, well, of course, go wrong, they don't fear it in the same way. And that in turn reduces their anxiety and their stress. So hopefully
that's great. It really does help
people understand how we can work on the two different areas. Yeah, that I
absolutely. Yeah, definitely. And the improvements and outcomes that can be made that's incredible. So and like I said, I know I've said it a few times now, but I'm so grateful to have you in the group and the work that you're doing and helping, supporting people. It's incredible to have you there. Hannah, thanks so much. It's
really great.
No, not at all. It's how can people contact you if they want to get in touch with you and find out a little bit more about the work that you're doing, or maybe approach you around any help and support that they might need?
Fab, yeah, thank you. So my website is bluelightwellbeing.uk. So you can have a little look at my website on there, of me offering obviously the one-to-one therapy. But if people actually, the only thing we slightly haven't covered is that I also do speaking. So I do public speaking.
Of course.
So I do talks for, so I do talks for, again, mainly for the emergency services. I've done them for cancer groups as well, wellbeing, sort of support local groups for wellbeing and mental health, but mainly, and Mind, mental health charity, but mainly I've done them for the police and NHS services. So you can have a little look on there of the services that I offer, read a little bit more about my experiences and my qualifications, so you can get in touch with me through my website. But I've got an email, hannah@bluelightwellbeing.uk, and I'm on LinkedIn under Hannah Bailey, Blue Light Wellbeing.
Fantastic. And you've got some really exciting stuff coming up as well, haven't you?
I've got loads of stuff coming up. Yeah, it's really great. I've got some talks to do for West Midlands Police and for Warwickshire Police. I've got got some filming coming up.
That was where I was going with this.
Exactly there. And confidence and self-esteem. Oh, is that where you were going with it? Yeah.
It was. Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, I've got some filming coming up this week, so that I can record some of what I do and put that out there as well.
Brilliant. Oh, fantastic. Well, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Sorry for the couple of disruptions that we've had. But yeah, and again, thanks for everything that you're doing. You're doing some amazing work, and it's been fantastic talking to you. Thanks so much for your time. I'm sure you'll agree that was an incredibly inspiring interview with Hannah, and massive thanks to her for her time. And just reflecting back, I think, recognizing the harm being caused by the job and then making that decision and then taking massive action. And, she found something that she was really passionate about. She invested in herself, she retrained, reskilled, and she's now doing amazing things for some huge organizations and working personally with many, many people. And, we're really, really lucky to have her in the group, and I'm very honored that she's so active. And massive thanks to Hannah for her time. So if you like what you've heard, then please leave a review. You can do that on Apple and Spotify. And just a reminder that doors to the Academy membership open again in September. And if you're interested in finding out a little bit more around the Academy, then you can contact me on andy@bluelightlevers.com to find out more. That's it for now. Another great interview coming in a couple of weeks' time. Look forward to speaking to you then. Take care. Bye-bye for now.